I'm soaring, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Well, practically today, we are talking about the results of these overgrowth in Berlin between the President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky, American and Special Bailiffs Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And in those negotiations, Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz was so in the chats for the day. Having already heard the Ukrainian-American delegation mish and continue. And at the same time, it became known that I would not go to the press. Tomorrow, and they will continue. Moreover, the European leader is a brother in them. The presence of Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz is obviously behind the wound again. With a year to go until the participants in May, French President Emmanuel Macron will arrive in line to Berlin. The Prime Minister and Britain's cursed Arma. So trying the President of Finland Alexander Stubb, the European leader and Namina colleagues such good events. Announced with the President, with the United States Donald Trump. But we can also say that this is a really serious round on itself tied from the American, Ukrainian and European position. They are extremely verbatim to trim for the situation. Now I'm not someone of course, but what will happen to the Russians? What else can the American counselors do to get along with the Ukrainians and the European politician and about the split position? And really bring the whole position to Russia. And then it is possible to advise another position. And in principle, our interest in the topic is split, I would say, with the Europeans. The bridle is a split position from the American administration of it. So that the whole split position is not out of the radu of our national interests. And the Americans also gave the entire cutting position to the administration of the President of Russia to all parties. And then the ball is already on the field of Moscow. And Russia is also on fire and on the points of peaceful years. It is more compromising today that the President of Ukraine has said to measure the Ukrainian success in the topic of the peace process. Not a haircut. I will mean, in another explosion of the peace process, the President of the Russian Federation Putin. And not the President of Ukraine. Not Ukraine, but Russia. And this skin would be on the results screen for us, fixing it would actually be scooped out by a tag of a different plan at this stage. Well, here's another important speech. Of course, it also turned out to be important for the United States, for the American administration. I basically respect, and not a one-time process, I say that the seams for the political season for the 14th breast. In the evening of Hanukkah light, and 4 years we want to spend time with those and flowers and those of my shan glances and ears, Yaki Yuletide from today to the con. For Steve Witkoff, and for Jared Kushner, it's like hundreds at the flower table today. I'm approaching the light for me, and briskly cut out ne spends ofidi, and not on evening blooming with the family. And everything is so in and out. The usual arrived before the German tables. What does it mean that the president with the style received in the state was numb, in order for them to be successful? Hardly his son-in-law and his friend covered the castle table. For the signifier Donald Trump hurrying and complacent in with a Dion type, this means that in ficusno, in principle. He was numb not in the fact that the dates of Trump and the same means. This means that the states are not ready to receive it until they can institutionalize it. And the Europeans, as you know, did not have enough yet in the workshops of Bravo. The fate of the Sovereign Secretary with the staff received in Marco Ruby. But what did you understand? The fact that the fate of the Sovereign Secretary Koftina is special to V2 and before the Congress about his ideas. She is somehow tied from Maybuttonham to the official intelligence. The Sovereign Secretary cannot fully. He can throw out the American power. You roll up to the specialists of your department for consultations, and with the help of real sensitive torture. Special presence President, you may not, and may richly, that I won't see reality. And we used to do it. In mind, it's time for Donald Trump to come to Moscow in the skin mind that Putin wants the mayor. And Ruby's Cola, after talking with Lavrov once, made phone calls to the president. So that specifically about the fact that Trump and Putin have an oyster and overgrown in Budapest, as we know. Donald Trump for Galena, I adore greedy oysters produced to concrete results. Well, it's clear that tomorrow will be the same day. And you are a crucial day for us to understand the split position of the American, Ukrainian, and European delegations. On May, the delegation of Berlin again spoke about the situation with the Donetsk region and about the position of the Americans. The Ukrainian forces withdrew from the territory of Donetsk region, and she looked like a demilitarized zone. But this is the Russian term demilitarized zone. Americans namagayatsia the term villa and economical areas. A simple torture. And who will control and order in the territory? Which means the Ukrainian troops are overestimating the entire territory, and the Russian Tutas are not included. I will mean something in practice. But they were placed to the President of the Russian Federation, Yuri Ushakov, saying that the Russian army may not enter the territory of the Donetsk region, but the Russian National Guard. In principle, I mean occupation. Because the National Guard, as we know from the occupation of Kherson, and you declare just for the way the army declares. Army is engaged chapel in sight. The National Guard is also engaged in cleaning up, pretending to occupy the occupied territory, to a loyal subject of the Russian Federation. So, because the zone is not demilitarized, because there are illegal auctions in the face of the zone of Russian special services. I'm already going to punish about the fact that you can just put some Russian Viskovs in the form of the Russian National Guard, who will check. Well, all tests are so important, saying torture number 1. I'm looking at the overgrown in the knock, and absolutely did not understand at the discount. Really kind of seen on the torture I hand over the Russians' accounts of Donbass. In principle, Americans with Ukrainians and Europeans will be able to get Tilky 4 discounts there. Prot, what we'll be able to do with the Russians is not yet their Russian-European Ochilnikov identify successful. In exchange for the torture, lead the view to the sk. I can be a legal nobleman in Ukraine with a Kim Chin and a clear view of the torture. You are the status of the territory claimed by Russia. To the fact that this time about holding a referendum. It is not the Ukrainian Hromadiyans who will embroider the test of the imperious land of Russia. You stumble upon Tilky with a constitutional, not with the possibility of implementing the results of such a refrain. We still say that we are not yet respecting the fact on the evidence of the article about the functions of the referendum. In the Ukrainian constitution, the constitution itself, deciding for the defense, conducts and the ideas are tied to the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And extremely, the judge of the court of Ukraine takes out on Ukrainians will vote for such separation. And with their vote the deputy of the parliament is similar. Another problem is I'm naked now. Who said that Ukrainians will vote for it? Even during the period of hostilities, that referendum and drones, and the offensive of the Russian army on Ukrainian lands will end with a negative result for those who accept the referendum. I tie up it is foreign territories. Well, it's nothing new in such doctors in May. I want you to shit simple pricks of such a referendum. Cyprus will come all the way to the European Union, and for this problem for us and Moldova, the memory of what happened. The European politicians asked the president of Cyprus, and the Cypriot politicians torture, and I am the way out and Prina. When you have a half of the island wife there, control the Turk, and there you find the Turkish Republic of Bir Cyprus is self-exiled. Let's go around. Here's the General Secretary's plan for you, Anna. Hold a referendum, and Cypriot politicians back in the days of the European Union were tied to holding a referendum on the islands eating. The referendum is bit by bit. Greek Cypriots voted and Protes. The Turkish Cypriots voted for not allegedly going to the islands, but the European Union moment on the side of a Greek Cypriot, who wanted to vote for the prominent ones of the referendum itself. So it is here. Vidna will be able to extort the territorial referendum itself, and no one can impose on us as a result of the referendum. No one can accept Ukrainians to vote for the Kremlin, in view of Ukraine, Crimea, Sevastopol, Donetsk and Lugansk, Kherson, Paris regions. That's a million tortures. A million tortures for the drive of Ukrainian guarantees, and so on. What kind of norms are the same Zarism? Because I'm still trying to make the norms look real in their implementation. And for talking about the fact that with the receipt of the United States under guarantees on the was away from the post-discharge, the sanctions against the Russian Federation and the decline of repeated aggression. And Trump is ready for such a yes, I will help. For a firm congressman. Guarantees. Because guarantees are guarantees. And we are with you for the Russian-Ukrainian guilt and in simple leverage. It is not like the dumping and not the yaks of sanctions against Russia against Ukraine. Well, we are not in the hall, I have not given up yet, because Mir Ugoda will still be signed. And the Russians really look like being burned in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front, which you hand over to the few faithful in the long run. The fact that the sanctions will be automatically visible, and not at times I will re-attack the Russians, may seems to be a guarantee for Ukraine, but we don't have clear articles like that. What's on Postachin dumping America? We do not give up yet, absolutely more logical than the Allied ones, we do not give guarantees. Let's say shoes in finance. I say, with the receipt of the state, they give Israel a speech against the rich. Since I received the United States in the icon of Putin's adoration, the blocky donates have been placed in the stupa of Ukraine. I still doubt that I have overlooked the political fiasco of Trump, Trumpism, and the far right. And the status of such an ally with the received in the state, and go to Nastya, and in the mouth I will reset. Trump Ukraine not a penny. Sounding for the sea received states before their capture of the president. Tesh is absolutely obvious. For another pitney. I am overstated by the debatable, and the bill for a political nuclear power plant. The idea that the Russians kind of control over the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. That such a rank and pomacty can be seen in Ukraine, and so much adored in the Kremlin. And I think they are often on dialogue. To the fact that the Americans want to have control over the spare part of the nuclear power plant. And you're absolutely more intelligent than you and your brother. The fate and who will be a participant in another 100 still happens with the guilt of Russia against Ukraine in terms of control over. Sashtesh torture I overestimated, is absolutely not regulated, and did not understand. Firm before the speech, Steve Witkoff's claim has already been announced, literally the furnace of our broadcast of our scope. With the receipt of the state and Ukraine have made overnight progress on Promovani in Berlin. Special representative of the President with the received in the state. Here we read, and the full statements of Kabul are published literally. Zustrik in Berlin, between President Zelensky, special envoy with Jared Kushner from the United States, and Ukraine. There were 5 waters. The representatives did not hold discussions on the blocks, as for the plan of peaceful regulation of economical programs. Then tortures. Overnight progress has been achieved, and you will be in the rant again tomorrow. Well, in principle, I respect a good pizza to the fact that there is no draft scandal with us, and you know. I can tell you more from the point of view of the logic of the Trump administration, and our bag is a chaotic administration. It still doesn't end with our narrow scandal. Kola still has night progress, and there is talk of a conversation about the 20th points. Of a dimensional plan for discounts, of course, then they, in principle, will not really teach us about the explosion. Of a peaceful dialogue. I repeat once again, our important tasks are head ones. I am on my own dossier of such a situation in the Yakin explosion of the peace process Russia. I will be the president of the Russian Federation, sanctions, it was possible from the rocket. To the continuation of the Russian visco-technical energy potential. There are still Tilke at the displacement of Russia, and the real Schlyack to the pumped-up guilt in Berlin. Is not supposedly of real significance, not from the point of view of guilt. We do not know whose weather will be with such a plan, and with such a recipe, with the American-Ukrainian delegation, and the Russian official. And the Russian President Putin himself. So serious, I would say a moment about I don't forget. Well, we are here for real, I would say and I have fucked up Russia even more careless places into Ukraine. She also has to get involved in guilt, there is still guilt that can end. Tilke to the Moscow skin apartment. Tilke in the Russian Federation, on the Muscovites themselves are full, not for them their childbirth. I have made the fault of the people's fault on Tilka, the fault of the service, and for the Russians, the statue of the people's fault. And that's what the whole fault can conceive of. How much of the blame is in their loved ones, their children, how much of the blame is in the fact that she choked. She bulged out in her prominent places. The fault of my stats is the reception cash guest of the Russian people and I, writing them is not a national bard. There is still trouble therefore once for well, so high in Russia. high, comfortable and happy in the Russian steppes of. Here is the counselor before the province of our subsidies. And still talking today about Pavo drone on the Russian table. Overgrown Coke will discuss the Ukrainians for the Americans is notified that the missile is not in the Belgorod and smoke. And raise her means in Russian strategic object. And, in principle, it can be with the Russians, as if for a blow, and for the Ukrainian infrastructure. So in the dark, I think it's a serious moment. Tied up with the fact that the most possible Russian reaction to the fact that Russian-Ukrainian guilt. So let's be Chikati. Snakes are those situations in the greatest and extremely all will lie down, and that our ally will cut out. The Americans will also cut out on their own. I will still be harassed, but so is the Ukrainian reaction to Daniel's chain. I think it will be the synchronous reaction of special student Steve Withoff. I think that we are already close to the summit of the European Union. There is no one in principle who can be caught up in the decision about the so-called reparative loan for Ukraine. And we will still be pro-Russian on the politicians and leaders of Europe, such as Prime Minister of Cleaning Robert Viktor Orban. Such Prime Minister of Words and Robert Fitz, and will not be able to blockages, not the decision of the European Union. Everyone in Berlin will have both Macron and Merz. In principle, the largest power in Europe is also preparing a reparative loan. But for now, we know that Tiki Italy is falling apart before it's not being out of Italy's premier, Giorgia Meloni and Bologna. In short, on the delivery, but the printouts to those who would like to block the reportage credit clearly will not be exhausted. And I'm so up to a serious moment tied up with the fact that I was given the topic of dialogues on injections completed by Russian-Ukrainian guilt. So I think that you and I really stitch you up for them, and deduct another really Trump was numb in the fact that the whole situation with us with this plan was I'm richly motivated here. I think that here on Tilk motive of the Nobel Prize. Here, in the form of a game, the role is important for Trump. The motive is the confrontation with China. He will be able to pay for the Russian-Ukrainian guilt, and we will attach to him from the Russian Federation. Even before their tender and neutral position, even before the American-Chinese beard, which is before the American-Chinese confrontation. And as for discounts, we all, of course, that an economical truce between the received states and the People's Republic of China. And extremely Trump will report tied up with that. Diets at once against the Chinese influx on the type are tied from May Butney. Let's say that today an article appeared in Leica tied to that with effort, and the Trump administration, the coalition in a partner. And it is already available on Friday already Galoshina. They are also opposed to not swimming into the People's Republic of China. In Gaza, you are critically important for the American economy mineral. The one who is united in a coalition for Singapore, Australia, Japan. The beer on the bark is Israel. Here is such a cutting job. Of course, even in those situations, adoration that such minerals can be occupied in Russia. So there will be signs of Europe, Canada, the United Arab Emirates on the topic of the coalition summit. This is a really serious initiative to oust China. Well, so let's really keep a close eye on what happens when an anchor tied to a Chinese track hardens into a Russian-Ukrainian vein. Well, it is known that it will also be important to us, as the residual with the received states of Ukraine look like. The statement of the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, also appeared. As you know, maybe tomorrow in Berlin. I'm saying that Nikola is still so close and has been for 3 years. We are on the Dorn water without a Coke 44, and having said the President of Finland means and mean Miro the water where Tesh rain is important, I would say so and torque. Mated from Majbet and Razvedka color no go on the water because I think the speed I began diluting with Trump. Rispalas with the White House and so I. Well, here is a short analysis of what else could be tomorrow. I'll be gone, which will be serious. Well, in those situations, I want to ask you for a true test to subscribe to all subscribe to Sasha on the channel. I wait for such an hour. I want to tell you more, we are with you and the demo on the channel millions, heard Tilka 3000. Subscriptions up to 1 million subscriptions. And the vrak is that I'm a yaki kind of Hafakushni Navaga will bring you to reason. You still go to Kola 4 Con, shaking cool drays. To say one more thing, it's not a rotten result. You know that such a Hanukkah jigga, and you can understand it for another check and an offensive lesson. That's how I twisted the zig, and we will dilute it with a year. So they cut down the Hanukkah in this way for a souvenir. Subscribe to the channel for honor sacredly. And I will be in the Diaknaya skin. I will be in the Diaknaya skin. Who will put a podobika? I will be in the skin. Who will comment on the story? So it is already important to you, and does not give up for all of us, so that there may be channel tools. What on your mind, and not Wichow, and not a bunch of greedy, have never seen Ukraine. Fear according to Vaga values. Well, you recognized this in fact in Russia, even in contacts in Russia. And recognized the representative in Ukraine still contacts with Ukraine. It used to be chaotic. From the cob in the hall, I respected it as if I was engaged in a Russian-Ukrainian track. It turned out to be strong before the Russians before him. Then he was transferred to Ukrainian directly in the form of playing a night role. And get in with a close descent and on the gas. As Trump approaches that he can talk with Putin. But they do not come to Ukraine, maybe because they are not an official, but just to come, and for them not from politics. Simply demonstrates the will of the president. And I didn't say they wouldn't come. The title. Cola Russia can attack Europe, and hybrid wine. And on your thought, I am not yet a POC, as an objective counselor, that Russia is attacking Europe, and not a hybrid guilt. I have already pressed the fear of our European subsidies. I think that I will not attack Europe like this. When I talk about the scaling of guilt, I use hybrid guilt on the was. Just a hybrid wine in itself. I am such a guilt, it may be tied to numbered engagements, and it may be tied to the fact that you are a hybrid guilt. As a result of the transition of the directory, I do not think that the Russian army today, I really am not in order to attack Europe. Well, seriously. It's gone beyond the whole of Ukraine itself, and such a confrontation. Not wide. I have not yet succeeded for the fault. And it can still be an attack, I'm absolutely in, there can be a missile strike, and I don't need it. I hope in Ukraine Pokrovsky. But in order for Ukraine to pretend to be not a subordinate territory, we missed the moment when the guilt ceased to be front line. From Europe, it may be true. And there will be rockets flying there, and now something is not contagious. It will not be able to date, there will be cyber attacks, they will be shot down, there will be catastrophes globally. Problem gates for nuclear power plants. And Russia will embroider and pretend Europe is not attached to the zone of the temple, but who has technical progress to give a post and a crab on the history of continents without sticking in. Not without such wires and scenes. Scenes, of course. What is controlled by Vlad's democracy for authoritarianism? Then an authoritarian ruler can also be bullshit at the whip and beatings of behavior. For the American side of Vitka and Kushner, without the fact that the imitation of amateurs. So the presence of Kushner there, in principle, is about the fact that the Americans are about what not to say just like that. And of course, I don't have a brother's fate for discounts. And just Trump, who captured the fate. And if Rubin went, he still has to institutionalize it at the match. Although the Europeans had enough crime of the most powerful secretary, with the state received. I'm not saying it once. Pan Vitaly, Weasel will explain even before the Ukrainian regions in the local constitution of Russia. The Tilks of Donetsk and Lugansk are outside in administrative cordons, but I do not know, the Yaks can be defeated. In the constitution of the Russian Federation, it is red, but there are 5 regions, and 6, that I am Crimea and Sevastopol. All regions of Ukraine. In the constitution of the Russian Federation, it is clearly written to the regions and Russia, the Donetsk People's Republic, the Luhansk People's Republic, the Kherson region, the Paris region, the Republic of Crimea and Sevastopol. Not like firm the nasty about administrative cordons, there can be no Zagoli in the constitution of Russia on Maya. And the stakes of the independence of the DPIE and the LPR are richly tested by someone. And it is also written in their constitutions, chistitutes, that he is there. And I put them in the spring cordons and in the administrative ones. In their statutes, it is also written out and embraces the entire territory of the Donetsk region. Through the entire territory of the Luhansk region. And Putin sweats the chairs through Den to Vagas is not the mind yet and happens. What's out there, and you'll find out in the intercordon, you're in their statutes, there I don't know what they had there. I do not know what a Zagolif is. I have a statute in the constitution of the independent power of the Kherson region, and on the fallow power of the reserve region. For all the garbage on Sprat and buckets drove away. And I think that all regions of Ukraine are inscribed in the administrative cordon. I just don't understand the logic of Pan Valery. You can have him get it was available once in a while. And the Russians themselves know that the conflict will be frozen. But I'll tell you, I'll get infected even on the territory of the administrative cordon. According to filings. Now they call both Kherson and Paris places and controlled and Ukraine. not Ukrainian and places, to a Russian place under Ukrainian control. So I would not be a Rexed region. What can really be done by Trump's chick, so that Ukraine-Europe sent Trump 4 mere plans and declared about his adoration of the morons? Well, I think just Trump a way to help Ukraine. I conduct intelligence data. The sale can be dropped for European pennies. It could have been precinct sanctions against Russia. But we can still talk calmly. It can be seen from the received states that we are aware of the food about Russia's super effort. From the participant suite, Russia's attempts to obtain a staff in the nuclear understanding. To that ambassador, oh God. This means, in principle, one of the nuclear superports of a neighboring power has been destroyed. I don't think it's necessary. And no one wants to send Trump out publicly, although in several cases, of course, in private times at a time. The Europeans take a very serious position. And this is an absolutely obvious fact. Why Trump with a small gust words hoof and Putin, not the analysis of reconnaissance data of its intelligence services? Because Trump is not a traditional politician. To believe in a business in a turnaround, respecting a political decision, you can also check the logic. But we won't have a president with the received ones in the state until 2029 hand. Obviously, it is not for the Ukrainian state that the political events since 2029 are important. And for the actions of Ukrainians to vote for on the territory of Russia itself still lies on legal mechanisms, but on obvious resources to prevent aggression. But the fact that Russia has its own resources to prevent aggression, pretending to be a legal mechanism, and she wants Zalop to be legally captured, so that no one has a doubt about who to impose the Donbass for Paris and Kherson and the Crimea. And Russia here did not recognize the logic of the Soviet Union from such a rich one, and took and found out. Che of the People's Republic of China at Zedong, richly learned in 30 in the West, and then he took and found out why he could not. That he should be afraid geographically. All the torture for an hour or so is operational control from the point of view of the Russians. Then we need to vote and start on the territory. Russians want Ukrainians to praise and close this topic. So there are still 5 regions with 6 kozels there today, and tomorrow now Petya. So Ukraine will be laid down. Tell me what the Democrats are doing and not what else. The fact that the current ratings in the Rada elections to the chambers of the spacer in democracy today are in odds with the pillbox bill in the chamber of supply. The Senate is serving until the election, and in those districts I am Republicans to the rule. There is no chance for a stage democracy, and in the chamber just for a queue. It is necessary to choose 2026 hand, and the trend will not change now. And this skin can be tied firm, I would say, real, economical, and with a mind and administration. Also Republicans. I won't have them. Republicans with Trump won't be able to. The American Institute shuts up behind the weak proteas. But that's not what the weak proteas are. There is even more serious in the Institute from those received in the states. The fact that the federal state, there's still a rich Trump's decision to shove the court, and the fact that the hour has ended, is that I still have Republicans spending control on at least one of her chambers to Congress. The whole chamber is really serious about the president's proteas. Well, here you are pushing. I'm the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson there. I'm obviously Trump's real Protedia Bach initiatives. Not to put laws on site, but to show a Democratic Speaker. cannot sardines with presidential initiatives would not leave it to a vote. Of course. And that's it. And Trump will tilky pass. Here. So in the sense we do not rent, or completely obvious the moment, tied with Maybutin tracing with the resulting state. It is not necessary to think about American democracy so easily yet. We're talking about the whole situation. Well, then, I think, friends, that we will take a stitch, and tomorrow the workshop will follow the course. We can already talk about the ether, and we're tied up, and the fact that tomorrow, Sasha, so I will be bilsh a sufficient result. There will be statements for the press, and the President of Ukraine, and special representatives from the received states. And Okilniki outside France and Britain, and Finland will arrive. And you and I will not have mats with us, but the bilsh manager has understood, tired of the picture of what happens. Like you, of course. So let's be checkity. I adore all of you soap knights, and I want to shit again, so that you can subscribe to the channel. I will be in the Diaknia for a skin subscription, for so and I would say, a Christmas gift. A fortune telling from the demo on the channel millions, and 3,000 she've ended. The cap and the channel have become a millionaire channel, so I am extremely interested in your subscriptions, your likes, your comments before what you think next is the process. Practically, the ships of the decisive day, the decisive plan for discounts, really you decided not plans. As far as we can talk about the worm imitation of reality forever. All of the not taken fate in this problem for the American president, and his negative reaction. It's all in one YouTube. With Putin, we can say in one conversation in such situations. Well, we will complete these broadcasts with you. I urge you to help the Ukrainian army. Brother, and share in the proven collections of people you trust. It's already in. The offensive has baked the confrontation in the light of the armor of the power of Ukraine is overestimated by the head, I would say. The watchman, the head of our sovereignty, our independence, and, of course, the type that the forces of Ukraine are defending. I want to guess that today is Infantry Day, so I want Tesh to vaccinate everyone until the day, and Pobozati, so that you lose your strength turned from happiness, from rich to guilt for thieves, and let's continue Ukraine. Dyakuyu.